Good evening, everyone. The meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Board Member Otero, I was able to deliver that item to Mrs. McNabb. I'm sorry, Board Member Frank Otero.
Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of others to join, so we should be started in just a few minutes. I just wanted to give everyone an update.
Got it.
Test, test, test.
I do apologize for the delay. We're just waiting for a couple more people and then we'll begin. Mr. Stephen Otero, can you start your video? Thank you, sir. All right, I apologize for the delay. The time is now 5:17, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. The board members are participating via Zoom meeting. I'd like to welcome those who are participating via Zoom and those watching the board meeting via live streaming. The link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. If the board is on break, the screen will fade to black and sound will be muted. In the event there's a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. Participating via Zoom, we have Mr. Eloy Hidon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon. We have Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Frank Otero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Frank Otero. We have Mr. Stephen Otero. Can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you, sir. And I saw David Vickers. Mr. Vickers, can you hear me? I believe he disappeared. We'll give Mr. Vickers a couple of minutes to get back in. Mr. Vickers, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. All righty, don't move. That brings us to announcement of meetings. Dr. Romero, would you please announce the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. President. This meeting has been announced in accordance with the open meetings resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Las Lunas School Board of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Mr. Vickers, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Dr. Romero, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. President, I don't have any recommendations for changes or deletions.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. I will stand for a motion on the agenda.
Mr. President, I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon. I have a motion by Mr. Hidon to approve the agenda as presented by Dr. Romero and his staff. I will stand for a second.
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes,
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Or Mr. Hidon, sorry. How do you vote?
Yes.
Not intentional. Thank you, sir. And I vote yes. That's going to bring us to item number 5, the approval of the district learning plan. What I would like to have is Dr. Romero present the district learning plan probably in its entirety, because I believe if we start asking questions in the middle of it, we're just going to go off into a lot of directions, and I would like to kind of keep us back on this track. And then please feel free to write down your questions, and when he's done presenting the reentry plan, we can ask those questions that I know everybody wants to hear. And then after, if we have any discussions or anything, then I will ask Mr. Romero to give us his final recommendation. I'll turn this over to Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the board. I do have a presentation tonight on a proposal for reentry. Before I start with this presentation, I want to just kind of put this conversation in context. We have been in a remote learning environment for the 2020-21 school year. I really want to thank our school leaders, our teachers, our educational assistants, our nurses, our people that work with our technology, our custodians, our facilities. We have all done an amazing job, and I know, I apologize, I'm forgetting some groups here, but I want to thank you for a year in which we really had to learn to be able to pivot in a very fast manner to be able to meet the needs of our students in our community. As recently as last week, we have been in constant conversations with our Secretary of Education, Dr. Brian Stewart, and of course with the executive branch and our governor. And we have been looking at ideas about the day when we will start to work with students back into a face-to-face model. This last week, actually starting yesterday, we did have some of our very first students start to come back into an in-person setting with our CEL classrooms. The reports I'm getting, we've had some really positive first few days with that. But I want to take us back to a week ago, just under a week ago on Tuesday. We had our governor provide us with the state of state address, and also on that same day, on Tuesday, we had a presentation or a press conference from our Secretary of Education. At that time, they informed the public, along with public schools and superintendents, that we had the opportunity to move forward with a hybrid learning plan starting as recently as close as February 8th. Now, this is a conversation we've had with the New Mexico Public Education Department for months. We have been looking about how we can have some opportunities in a very safe manner to be able to work with some students in a face-to-face setting. Some of these include some of our students, that have high needs, special education students. We definitely wanted to work with some of our younger students, our K1, 2. These are our students that are learning how to read, and in many cases, it's very important to be able to be face-to-face with them. And we did have some of those opportunities that were provided by the Public Education Department. The last group that we really wanted to be able to have some options that up to this point we hadn't had any was to be able to work with our high school students. Specifically, seniors that are on track to be able to graduate and making sure that they are continuing to get their credits on track for graduation. Another example of that is working with our freshmen. Freshmen are high school students. This year they have not stepped onto campus, so they haven't had that opportunity, that freshman experience about what it's like to be able to be in a high school setting. But research tells us that this is a very, very important year. This is a year for our freshmen that they need to be able to do well. They need to get good grades. They need to get their credits to be able to be on that track for graduation. And so these were some of our concerns across the state that we had been working on with the Department of Education and, of course, with our governor's office. So this last Tuesday, when we heard the opportunity for us to be able to possibly move forward and had the permission to be able to move into hybrid setting, we wanted to see if that was an option for us. I also want to, really commend everyone across this district. They have been working extremely hard since this pandemic started to be able to get ready for virtual learning, to be able to get ready for small group instruction, and of course, this possibility of hybrid instruction. So what I have tonight is a proposal to get to the board about where we stand when it comes to our readiness for in-person hybrid learning. We want to be able to do this in a very safe manner for both our staff and our students. And so when the governor gave us the date of February 8th, after I was, really able to talk and reflect on that date's too soon. February 8th is too soon. What I want to be able to do is provide the Board of Education with some guidance on when I feel we could move into a hybrid environment in a safe manner, but do that in a very controlled and scalable way. And that's what you're going to hear throughout this presentation. So as you see here, this is our proposed reentry. Let's go to slide 2, please. There's some foundational principles that we want to be able to keep in front of us as we're thinking about and having this conversation. That absolutely the health and safety of our staff and students are going to be kept at the highest level. We want to be able to make sure that we have very tight building safety plans that are in place and certified. And I'll talk a little bit about that these will be certified by both Public Education Department and by our local fire department. That we actually plan and put into this plan a time for transition for staff. And so you're going to hear through the calendar a 3 to 4 week transition for our staff, but also, and this allows for classroom teachers to be able to come back into the classroom, bring their classrooms back to life, but also be ready when it comes to professional development that we are going to be proposing tonight. It's also an opportunity for students to get ready, to be able to make sure that they are in the mode of coming back to school and allowing for any questions that our community has with our schools, for our teachers, for our principals, for myself. We also want to make sure that we're educating the entire child. This is a time where many students, all of our students, have not had in-person learning. And this has been a concern for all of us. We want to make sure that it's important for many of us to be able to have eyes on those students so that we can address social and emotional needs. This is also going to be a traumatic time coming back in. And that's why it's important that we take this slowly and scalably over time. We want to make sure that we're providing a high quality instruction. When we look at our virtual learning that we had on the first day of school back in August, compared to what we're doing now, we have grown so much because we've learned so much over this time. We want to make sure that we do the same thing when it comes to, as we have this transition into small group and or hybrid learning. So we want to be able to provide a hybrid instruction for those who want it. But we also want to make sure that we are providing remote instruction for those who need it. You're going to hear tonight a proposal in which we have a strand for virtual learning and we have a strand for hybrid learning. And we also have a continued commitment to being transparent with the Los Lunas community, and we're looking forward to continuing that transparency. Next slide, please. So, one too far. There we go. So we do have a recommendation tonight that and when I say that this recommendation, before I read this recommendation, this is a recommendation that comes forward ensuring that we feel very confident that we can do this in a very safe and staggered and scalable environment. So we recommend that Los Lunas schools can transition into a hybrid instruction and begin possibly NMA in-season activities. I'm going to move my little square so I can read the whole thing. Starting on February 22nd, using the guidelines provided by New Mexico PED, New Mexico Department of Health, and New Mexico Activities Association, with the option to serve students who wish to remain fully online for the remainder of the semester. So I'm going to break this down into a few different groups. We have our special education group right now, and we have continued to increase support with the transition into hybrid. And we really started this actually yesterday. We had our first group of students start in the CEL classrooms in our elementary schools. But we are also looking at how we can expand that and do that in a very safe and scalable model. We're looking at small groups of students who will continue to receive support based on their IEPs. And with appropriate and as appropriate students who require additional in-person learning can receive it. Ancillary services will be done in accordance with each IEP. So right now, again, we started off very slowly, very controlled, and it is possible that over time we can start to scale up more and more classrooms when it comes to our special needs students. You're going to hear tonight, and I'm going to show you a calendar in just a little bit. So I'm going to kind of tell the same story over and over again, that we can look at possibly providing our high school students to begin with this reentry plan, beginning with our seniors and juniors and starting the week of the 22nd. So this would provide transition time for students. So we have some time. Today is February 2nd. This would give us almost over 2 weeks to be able to provide that transition. But one thing I want to stress is that we would be very specific in making sure that students are connected to cohorts. The students are going to be grouped together and we hold the integrity of those cohorts. That is what the key is to be able to control acceptable amount of safety within our schools, is to make sure that we are doing this through a cohort-based environment. And then we'd be able to roll in our freshmen and sophomores in a cycle after the seniors and juniors. So again, this is an example of how we scale this up over time. In planning with our middle schools, we are looking at possibly recommending a start date of March 1st. This would where we would start with 8th grade students coming through those cohorts. And once we're able to build in those 8th grade students, then we would start to bring in those 7th grade students. Again, you're going to see that option to be able to start with a smaller group of cohorts of students, and then we're able to add students as we roll in through the weeks. Talking with our elementary classrooms, we're looking at actually beginning to scale in grade level starting March 22nd. That's the week after spring break. And we've talked about the possibility of scaling those in, really starting with our pre-K, K1 and 2, and then we start to scale in our 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's been a lot of conversation about athletics. Part of this was connected to athletics from New Mexico PED. And with this start date, it is possible that we could start with participation in MA athletics. Now, we're still working through the issues with that. My latest information is with the model I just am describing to you, we may not meet the requirements to start NMAA. This is going to be an ongoing debate with NMAA. What we want to do is make sure that we implement a hybrid environment, but only if we're going to do it in a very safe way. So we have some conversations right now with NMAA and New Mexico PED about that definition of hybrid. Currently, where we stand today, we wouldn't, based on what I'm presenting to you tonight, not meet the requirements to be able to participate in athletics. Next slide, please. So what are we asking of students and families? Students and families that want to return in a hybrid environment would have the opportunity to return in a limited, scalable capacity. So Again, what I'm talking about is we would start with our seniors and juniors. We'd scale in our sophomores and freshmen. At the same time, you're going to start to see us scale in 8th grade, 7th graders. And then on the back end with elementaries, we start with pre-K, K1, 2, and work our way up in a very scalable, controlled environment to make sure we ensure safety. Students and families that this isn't an option, it's not something that interests you, could remain fully remote. And we would continue to be able to provide that high level quality remote environment, so that would be fully online. Next slide, please. So again, here's the proposed timeline if we started around February 22nd. So again, I want to start even to next week, where here we are this week on February 1st, today's February 2nd, starting with our CEL classrooms. These are our special education classrooms in our elementary setting. We have started that this week. We're on day 2 with that. We've had a great week. It's all gone very smooth yesterday and today, and we're going to continue to monitor that. Next week, we would allow teachers to be able to come back into the buildings, be able to go back into their classrooms. They would continue to be able to provide a virtual learning environment from their classroom. This is where they have all of their curriculum, all their teaching tools, and start to bring their classroom back to life. This is also where we would start to be able to have the safety walkthroughs. This is where we have requirements for New Mexico PED to have a minimum standard of what those safety protocols are going to be like. We do have all of those implemented now, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that further in the presentation. But we would have an independent group come out from PED to ensure that every one of our classrooms meet those standards. And we'd also have another independent group come out, which would be our fire inspector, to make sure that we meet all of those standards. We'd also need to start working on verifying students who want to work fully remote and hybrid, along with starting to work on the transportation needs. So we did send out a survey this last week, and I want to thank everyone that participated in that. We got some general big information about how many people were interested in staying remote, going to hybrid, interested in a small group. Our next step would actually be having conversations with those families and those students about who wants to really be interested in hybrid or remote, and then we can start to generate class lists and start to generate transportation needs. As we move into that 3rd week in February, school staff would fully transition into the buildings. We'd actually have designed work days so that teachers could actually have whole work days to be able to get classrooms ready. We want to make sure we do this in a very thoughtful way to give teachers, classroom teachers, enough time to be able to get ready. We'd also notify families of the hybrid assignments so that they know what that's going to look like specifically for them, because depending on what grade level you're in would dictate into what days you would be coming to school. We would be communicating with families. This is also a time where we start to increase our surveillance testing to 25%. When we are ready to move into hybrid, one of the current responsibilities that we would have is to be able to bump our surveillance testing, which is the random testing of our staff, from 10% to 25%. And what that means is we would be testing every single staff member that would be connected to students at least once a month. It would be over a 4-week cycle. As we move into the next week, February 22nd, high school seniors could possibly be coming to school seniors and juniors coming that week for hybrid instruction. Protocols with students would be adjusted as needed. We'd be able to work with a very purposeful small group of students to be able to see how things are going. And when I say that, we want to make sure that we are being very thoughtful about how students enter school, how we have staggered entry into school, how we get to class, how we have seating within the classroom, what it looks like during passing periods, what lunch is going to look like, and then also how the day ends and a staggered ending to the day. We'd also possibly be able to be ready to start with NMA sanctioned activities. Then we get into the 1st week of March. This is possibly when we can start middle school instruction, where that hybrid instruction would be in that cohort model. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to kind of say this again in a different version. So once again, we're on February 1st. Our CE classes have begun. We get to next week, possibly where teachers can return to the classrooms. This is also where we'll be installing our air purifiers. We have one in the boardroom right now. We've got it running. It's about 2 by 3 foot. Kind of looks like a portable air conditioner. That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's got multiple layers of filtration with a high quality filter, with a charcoal filter, and the last level would be a light that would actually purify the air. And so we are looking at getting those for every one of our classrooms. That's going to be a requirement as part of the return for hybrid. And then this is also the week where we're looking at having NMPED and our fire marshal come in for our site visits to certify that we have met all the requirements into moving into hybrid. On the 15th would be the week where we'd actually start professional development also. So we still have teachers teaching virtually. We have teachers being able to get their classrooms ready. But we're also looking at the professional development. And I want to speak a little bit to this in that we are looking at a program called Nearpod. And Nearpod does have a lot of history in our district. I was able to talk with our school leaders, and we do have Nearpod in a number of our school facilities. What's great about Nearpod, it allows us to be able to work both in a virtual environment and a face-to-face environment simultaneously. And what's great about this district also is we have wonderful technology. We have wonderful support people to help us work that technology. And so all these tools together are going to give us a heads up to be able to provide this environment at a very high quality using a tool like Nearpod to provide that virtual instruction and our in-person instruction really at the same time. This would be the week that we would start professional development for that. Possibly on the 22nd is where we would look at hybrid instruction for our high school seniors and juniors. Possibly on March 1st is where we would be looking at hybrid instruction for our 8th grade students. And really what I'm trying to say here is that we can see this gradual increase in what we're doing every single day and every single week. Next slide, please. We get into that first week of March. This is just a repeat. We'd start 8th grade instruction. And then you see that week of the 8th is where we'd possibly be bringing in sophomores and freshmen and starting to scale them in to this environment, to a cohort system. And then on the 11th, we're looking at maybe bringing in our 7th grade students. And then we get to spring break. After spring break is when we could look at possibly starting to bring in our elementary schools. And I want to be just kind of point out something here. This actually would give us over a month and a half at our elementary schools to be able to make sure we prepare everything and get ready for those elementary schools to start to come in. And again, what you're going to see there is you're going to see it scale in a little bit at a time, possibly starting with our pre-K and K, 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and 5th and 6th. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit of information about how we're getting prepared for this. This has been something that we are working on really throughout the school year. We continue to revise our inventory, making sure that we have things out to those that need it. So we're looking at that PPE, personal protective equipment, that we currently have within the district. So I want to give you some ideas of what that looks like. Right now, we have over 12,000 student cloth masks, over 12,000 cloth adult masks. We've got over 1,800 N95s, over 1,500 KN95 masks. We've got over 33,000 disposable masks, over 3,100 gallons that are disposable. We've got over 6,000 gloves and over 2,200 face shields. Excuse me for a minute. You can see that we started to put in some front office barriers. It's going to be the plexiglass barriers for our front offices. We also have for our diagnosticians portable plexiglass barriers. I talked a little bit about the air filtration that we're going to be putting into classrooms starting hopefully next week. We have lots of hand sanitizer that's available in schools, disinfectant supplies, things like tape to be able to mark off our 6 feet social distancing in offices and classrooms, outside of classrooms as we line up. We got the EMIS fogging machines. I was able to kind of get a tutorial on this with our buses, and we have them throughout the district, but the example it has of how we use them to be able to disinfect buses. And then, of course, the very specific protocols and procedures if there is somebody that is exposed and what that's going to look like. And this is actually all laid out by Department of Health, and we have a direct connection to what we call a SHA. If we do have an exposure within our work environment or classroom environment, we have direct access to somebody with Department of Health that allows us to be able to make the decision to act very quickly to be able to contain that exposure. Next slide, please. So what's the rationale for this recommendation? So when we do go back into a hybrid environment at some point, we want to be able to be prepared for this environment. And that's what we're doing right now. We are putting the work in to make sure that we're going to have safe environments for both our staff and our teachers. We know that there's no substitute for in-person learning. And even in a limited fashion, such as a hybrid model, we know that this is a good opportunity for students to have even some in-person opportunities. This is going to be a need for some of our students. And it is always a good thing. I think it's something that we can all agree on, that in-person learning is a good thing for our students. But we also recognize that in-person learning also supports the student's social and emotional need. So we're really talking about two areas here. We want to be very aware of students' instructional needs, and we also want to be very aware of the students' social and emotional needs. And a lot of that can be taken care of, even if it's a very limited exposure to in-person learning. We're working on our building safety plans. In March, building safety plans were developed. The plans have been updated multiple times in alignment with NMPED and NMDOH. Even as recently as right now, we're continuing to adapt and evolve those plans. And I'm really excited to you just a little bit. We're going to show you the tool that are going to be bringing all of those plans together. That's going to make it very transparent for everyone in the district, the community, to know exactly what is in those reentry plans. We also are working with the Los Angeles Fire Inspector, and he's prepared to be able to come out and certify when we're ready. We're looking at, we want to be able to make sure that we do that prior to the date of hybrid. So for purposes of this conversation, we want to make sure that he gets in before February 22nd. Vaccinations of staff. We've had a wonderful relationship with local DOH. I want to thank everyone that's a part of that system. Also Valencia Fire. We have been able to have a great partnership in how this is going to happen. And also working with them to be able to provide vaccinations for the community, but also plans for how they are going to be vaccinating staff members. We had a wonderful plan, and I'm going to say that within the last week and a half, that plan has changed because we have not gotten supply of vaccines that we were expecting. We're going to continue to work with the Department of Health, with the governor's office, and with New Mexico PED to get back on that schedule when it comes to vaccinating our staff members. Staff members, if you work for the schools, you are part of 1B. But what changed last week, about a week and a half ago, is that we are part of the 1B schedule to be vaccinated. But educators got pulled off the front end of that and are put at the back end of that. So it's going to be some time, unless there's some changes at the state level, to be able to put us back in the front end of that vaccine schedule. So I wanted to give a little bit of data about just Valencia County. This is not pertinent. This is not just encompassing of Los Angeles schools, but really of Valencia County. I think this is important for board members to help you make a decision about how we move forward. So if we look at the month of January, this is our most recent data. We had 4,558 citizens contract COVID-19. That gives us a 5.9 total positivity rate in our county for the month. And with that, we had 886 total positive cases in the county during the month of January. And then we go over to the support from the community. So we put out a survey over the last few days, over the weekend. It closed down yesterday evening, and we're getting the results of that survey. And I think this is going to be very important information for the board to help us make a decision about how we move forward. In that survey, it asked basically whether you are a staff member, a student, a parent, or a community member. And then the next question asked about what model would you be interested in moving into? And it really had three choices. It had staying in a remote, small group 5-to-1 cohorts, or moving into a hybrid. And then there was a third question with any other pertinent information. It was kind of a text box. We were able to kind of get some details about a specific individual's request in this survey. So the results of that survey are 52.9% of the students want to return to some in-person learning. That's a little over half of our students are ready to come back in some fashion. I think it's important that our students have that voice here. We have 41.5% of parents want to return to a hybrid model. So you can see it's a little bit under 60% that are wanting to continue to stay in a virtual setting. And then we have 33.
Dr. Romero, could you
Yes,
repeat
sir.
that number again, please? Sorry about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, no problem. Let me start again. 52.9% of students want to return to a hybrid model. 41.5% of parents want to return to a hybrid model. And 33.6% of our staff want to return to a hybrid model. Okay, next slide, please. So what's the realistic view of hybrid as we move forward? And this is whether we do this now or we do it later. This is going to be what we have to make sure that our district is ready for when we do move into a hybrid environment. That all COVID safe practices will be implemented. We have to be the models for what we do. Wearing our masks, washing our hands on a regular basis, and ensuring that we have social distancing. That students would be allowed to return to school really in a cohort model, and everything that we've been designing is really keeping the integrity of that cohort model in place. From the moment that they arrive at school to the moment they leave at school, making sure that we keep that cohort model intact. That students would receive additional academic support from teachers and staff during face-to-face. It's just another opportunity, another tool in our tool belt to be able to meet the needs of our students in a face-to-face setting. Some students absolutely benefit from that face-to-face environment. We've also learned that so many students really thrive in a virtual environment. This is going to be something that we are learning from every single day as we move forward. A teacher would emphasize social distancing and emotional learning, SEL needs during the face-to-face instruction. So I mentioned this earlier, that the priority would be that we are addressing students' academic needs, but also addressing their social emotional needs. That NMPED there are some restrictions for hybrid as we move forward. And it could mean that we would still have quarantine protocols, which could affect some of our classrooms. So as we move forward, this would be even more important that we as a staff and our students in our community very much stick to the quarantine protocols and the travel protocols moving forward. And of course, it is possible that we could have increased exposure and risk for students and staff. That is absolutely a possibility. Next slide, please. So what is a hybrid? Let's talk a little bit about it. I think there's been a lot of questions about that. And so what this really means is students would really be getting, I want to take out the conversation of virtual students for a minute. Virtual students are going to be students that get instruction every day through this format that we're on right now, using Zoom, using Canvas. That would be 100% of their educational experience. What hybrid does, mixes the two. You have days where you are going to be getting a virtual education, and you're going to have days in which you're going to be in a face-to-face, sitting with a teacher in the classroom and other students in the classroom in a face-to-face environment. Again, a large part of this is really focusing on social emotional learning of our students. We want to make sure that we have eyes on them. We can actually check to see how they're doing emotionally, physically, academically. And a large part of what we do, especially at the very beginning, is addressing those social emotional needs. It's also really enforcing some of the things that we are thinking are the best things to do, that we are continuing to make sure we are social distancing within our classroom. We're having students wash hands on a regular basis. We are helping support them wear masks Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every day that they're with us. But I've got a little weekly calendar there. And what it looks like is, as I say, we are keeping kids in cohorts. And so what that means is if you're a part of cohort 1, you may come to school on Monday and Tuesday, but then you would have virtual learning Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you're part of cohort 4, you might be coming on Thursday and Friday and have virtual learning on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So, but what it does is it allows for in-person learning for part of a student's instructional week or time, and it allows for in-person learning during that same time, as long as we're sticking and keeping the integrity of that cohort together. Next slide, please. So what is it not? It's not back to normal. It's not. It's not where you see here a picture of all of us in the gym, ready for pep rally, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's not what this is. This is going to be a time where we're continuing to social distance. We're wearing our masks. We're washing our hands. and we are keeping that cohort model in place. So we won't have functions like this while we're in a hybrid model. Next slide, please. So again, here's some health data for Valencia County. During the month of January, I want to just reiterate this because I think this is important for our board to know, that during the month of January, we had a 6.75 positivity rate. For the week, our most recent week of data, we had a 10.9% positivity rate. Now, we've seen over the last few weeks, we are getting better. We are getting better as a community, but we still are above that range in which of what is why we are in red. And so until we can really get in there into that green zone, we still do have a level of possibility for increased exposure in any setting that we're in. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? Let me move my little square here. We want to make sure that we align with our NMPED guidance. And we do have a specific guidance document that we're going to be able to check all the boxes off. We have got all our boxes checked off except for having those air filtration systems put in classrooms. They should be starting to go into classrooms starting next week. And you can see that as part of one of our action items tonight. We do want to set up the appointment with Valencia Fire to inspect our classrooms to make sure that we are certified with our COVID-19 safe practices for each school building. We have surveyed families to verify their choice. And as we move forward and know that we're moving towards a hybrid environment, we will start reaching out to individual families to see whether you want to stay in a virtual environment or move into a hybrid environment. This will then allow us to solidify transportation plans and what those bus routes are going to look like. We want to continue to expand our vaccination opportunities. We're going to continue to work with our local DOH and with our Valencia Fire, and of course with our New Mexico Department of Health to do that. And we'll work with our local NEA to ensure that all COVID-19 safe practices are in place. And I've been able to have some wonderful conversations. They kind of let me know if there is a bump in the road. I want to continue to hear from them. Next slide, please. So this is just a lot. There's a lot of writing on here, and I don't expect you all to read it because I know that the font is very small. But this is actually NMPED's requirements and verifications for us to be able to move forward. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got to be able to meet all of those things. And they're not going to just take our word for it. They're going to come down and they're going to actually do a site walkthrough to ensure that all of these things are happening in every single classroom in the district. Next slide, please. This is the requirements that they're going to be looking at when it comes to the fire marshal visit and NMPED visit. So you can see they're looking at things like, do we have the masks in place? Are the classrooms and common areas set up for 6 feet social distancing? Do we have the cafeteria plan figured out, how we are going to make sure that we don't have any areas in our school where we have mass gathering? We have hand sanitizer available to everyone. Are all the sanitation protocols in place about how we disinfect classrooms, both on in between classrooms at the end of the day, and our deep cleans that will happen on our off days? Are all our windows and our air filtration measures in place? Do we have evacuation plans? This is definitely part of the process. What happens if we have a fire drill? What does that mean as we actually exit the school? And when you see that, you can see hundreds of students outside in the school. How does this affect us if we are in a pandemic and we have to social distance? We've got that squared away. Do we have isolation rooms set up? This is in case we have anybody showing symptoms. We want to be able to have an isolation room for them that's going to be separate from the nurse's office, because we still want the nurse's office to continue to function as a nurse's office. Do we have all the protocols and signage in place at the school so it's very easy for you as a visitor, as a parent, to come in to know what the expectation is, and that'll be throughout the school. And so we are continuing to make sure that we're verifying this across all of our schools, classrooms, and departments. Next slide, please. So right now, as we're preparing for that safety team from PED and the fire marshal's office, we're doing our own internal safety walkthroughs. We want to be able to make sure that we're identifying areas of high concern, that we are coming up with solutions, that we're conducting those building walkthroughs. We're actually going through and we're creating the best practices that we have and sharing those with each other, so that if one school has a really great idea about how to deal with students at lunchtime, we can share that idea with other school sites. And part of what I'm going to show you here in just a little bit is actually the plans, the reentry plans that are going to be very well encompassing, but also a kind of a slide deck presentation or a video of what that looks like for every individual site, because every individual site does have some uniquenesses. Next slide, please. So again, one of the last things we're going to be doing starting hopefully next week is updating our HVAC air quality systems. Right now across our district, we're averaging a MERV 9. So that, what I mean by that, for those listening out there, this is the filters that are our HVAC systems. MERV 9 is a very high quality filter. Filters out the vast majority of particles in our air. What has been required of us is to be able to move up to a MERV 13 filter. And what the district is, there are some now, MERV 13 is a very high quality filter that is not normally used in our HVAC systems. So another option is for us to be able to provide the in classroom air filtration systems, and we're looking at being able to install those starting next week. Very user friendly, very easy to use, very quiet, does not get in the way, does not bother instructions. So we're actually excited about these air filtration systems. Next slide, please. So now I'm really excited to share with you kind of the tool that we're going to be using to bring everything that I've been talking to you all about tonight in one place. It's all housed in one place. And this is really the entire story of how Los Lunas schools will be implementing our COVID safe practices from the moment we get on a bus to the moment we step off the bus to be able to get home. So to do that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Chavez, and she's going to talk to us about the tool, the plan that we are using to bring every single facility's reentry plans together in one place. Sanchez? Ms. Chavez.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero. Thank you for allowing us to share all the work that we've been preparing in preparation for this date. It has been a total team effort. I would like to give a special thank you to Tamara Aragon. She is one of our digital learning coaches. She's been instrumental in creating this Canvas page. Canvas is what we use for our learning management system for our students and our teachers. We're bringing that to life with our administrators, so they'll have this tool to access all the information. So John, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see what I'm sharing? Okay, so this is Canvas. This is our learning management system. We have set up a Canvas page for our COVID-19 safety. The documents that are on this page have come from multiple departments in our district. Again, it's been a total team effort. We've had all of our protocols and guidelines placed on this page, information for our isolation room, custodial duties, transportation information, site walkthrough information from PED, and then a spreadsheet that our administrators will use as they're developing those cohorts at each school site. So looking at our protocols and guidelines, we have the Safe School Supplement that was created in March. When it first started as a document, it probably was about 8 pages because we didn't know much about the virus at the time. That has grown now to 28 pages. Nurse Jackie has gone through and supported everything in the Safe School Supplement. So like Dr. Romero referenced, it has information in there for school sites, from everything on how to prepare their isolation room to completing their fire drills that are required per our school requirements. So this gives you just a quick preview of what's in here. There's many embedded active links that take you straight to CDC. They take you to NMDOH. So our administrators will have up-to-date information. We decided to put all of our documents on Canvas because we receive a lot of emails throughout the day. This is a great way to organize everybody and have the most up-to-date information as we evolve with our knowledge of the virus and how to bring students back on our campuses. On this page, we also have,
Excuse me, Susan, Ms. Chavez,
yes, sir.
this is Eloy. Do we have a copy of this on our iPads? Of your
Dr. I'm not sure, but we can, Dr. Romero, I'll let you answer that one. I'm not sure if they have that.
So, Mr. Adon, I don't believe you do yet.
Okay.
Many of this is still being developed. We can absolutely get access to this. This is going to be something that any staff member would be able to have access. So you're going to see some of these things are developed, and then many of these tools are still being developed right now, especially some of our site entry plans.
I'm not going to go over everything because I know you probably have a lot of questions for us as well, but this is a one-stop shop for our district administrators right now, so they can access the most up-to-date information. There is also a link directly to the NMPED website where they have a toolkit that we have utilized throughout this whole process of learning how to live in this remote world and also learn how to bring students back onto our campuses. In addition to that, each school site is going to be uploading, similar to what students do, they have to upload their re-entry plan through Canvas. So just as our students are expected to update their assignments for their teachers through Canvas, so are our administrators. So we're also modeling our use of Canvas because that's our expectation for our students and our teachers. That will be something that we're doing as well as administrators. Dr. Romero, do you want me to show the re-entry plan template?
Yes, please.
So in addition to that, each school site, the administrators were shown this template yesterday. Each school will have a re-entry plan. So we'll be consistent across the board as far as what's in the plan. The things that will be different for each school site will be their actual schedules, because obviously the high school schedule is going to differ from the elementary schedule. So parents will be given this re-entry plan and it'll be for the community to view as well. Again, it's not finalized because we're waiting for the decisions that are made tonight, but we have been working through all this in preparation that we were able to reopen our schools. Dr. Romero, is there anything else that you'd like me to?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think I'm really excited about this tool. This brings everything together. It actually allows us to share our best practices amongst the school sites. And you see principals and school leaders right now at this moment are reconfiguring their reentry plans to be able to meet the most current information that are coming out of DOH and New Mexico PED. So I want to reiterate, we've had plans in place for a number of weeks and months. What we're doing now is we're just updating those plans and we're making sure that it fits all the requirements within this template. And you're going to start to see those plans get generated and added to our Canvas course over the next few days. All right, we'll go back to that slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Chavez. That was awesome. So again, I'm coming to the end of my presentation. Come back one slide, please. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's it. So again, I just wanted to end with what the recommendation could possibly be. Again, I want to be able to stress that we want to be ready as a district for when it's time to be able to bring students back in a hybrid setting. And I feel very confident that if we do this in a scalable fashion, and we do it very purposeful, where we are working with cohorts of students, we can do that. So with that, I do feel confident that I can recommend that Los Lunas transition to a hybrid instruction and can begin possibly working with the opportunity to work with NMA in season. Although I want to say that with some of the information I got today, the plan that I did present tonight does not meet the definition that PED has to return to NMA instruction or sports, but that is something that I want to continue to debate with them as we move forward. But it is possible that we could start in this with what I described tonight on February 22nd, using the guidelines provided by NMPED, NMDOH, and NMAA, with the option to serve students who wish to remain fully online for the remainder of the semester. Next slide, please. So with that, members of the board, Mr. President, I do stand for any questions. And you can end the slideshow.
Thank you, Dr.
Romero.
Board members, I will open the floor up for questions. If possible, I would like all of us to have the opportunity to ask our questions, make our comments. And maybe after we're all done doing that and we share some good conversation about this, we could make a motion probably after everybody gets a chance to speak. I would appreciate it if you did that. I can't tell you to do that, but I can certainly ask you to do that and just give everybody an opportunity. At this time, I will open it up for questions and or comments for Dr. Romero.
Okay, Mr. President, Dr. Romero, I guess I'll start. Dr. Romero, what specifically is the sticking point in the plan regarding NMAA and sports?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Right now, as we started this conversation a week ago, the requirement was to go into a hybrid environment. So you're going to see districts across the state start to look at how that's possible. Just yesterday, we were informed that there's going to be a definition that's required when it comes to what hybrid environments look like. And that definition, there's really two things to remember here. One is that we have to have the hybrid environment in place 2 weeks prior. So for purposes of this conversation, if we started on February 22nd, we wouldn't actually be able to start NMA sports for 2 weeks, which I think takes us to March 5th. So that's something to remember here. It's going to have to be in place for 2 weeks. The second thing to remember here is that what the public education department has defined as hybrid is that they really want a two cohort system where we have half the students coming like on an A day and the other half coming on a B day. My recommendation right now is that's going to be too much to do, specifically talking with how we are requiring social distancing amongst students on the campus and also with the teachers that we'll have in place for in-person learning. We don't have enough teachers coming back to be able to meet that need of a 50-50 environment. So I do feel confident and comfortable that we can really do a cohort model where it's really a 25% model, possibly in some instances a 1/3 model. So we have either full cohorts or we have a 3-course cohort system.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stephen Otero.
I'd like to see some kind of scenarios as to how we've seen your presentation. We've seen pretty much the logistics of it, but I want to know in reality what you guys haven't planned or our district hasn't planned for the start of the school day for these students that are coming and getting on the bus. So my first question is, and I know that the state has said 2 students can sit on the bus in 1 seat during transportation, although that doesn't make sense because that means they'll be within 2 feet of each other, if that's the case. Does our district plan to exceed that to give that coverage? Or are you still gonna go by the state's recommendations to have 2 students per seat?
So I'm going to give you maybe a real life example to help kind of put that into real life context. And so I think to simply answer the question is we will absolutely be abiding by all of the requirements by DOH and PED. And there are some, what does that look like on transportation? Well, they have given us guidance about what that means, and so that kind of gives us the guidance in which we can work in. But for example, I'm going to give an example of seniors at Las Lonas High School. We have just under 300 seniors. So I'm going to give 300 because it's easy to work with our head with math. And based on the feedback that we got from students, 50% of them want to come back, and 50% of them want to stay in a remote setting. So that brings us from 300 seniors down to 150 seniors that we're looking at to be able to come back for in-person learning. And then I talked about, and I want to thank Mr. Vickers for his question because it kind of set me up to talk about really putting them into a 4 cohort model. So now we're taking 150 seniors and breaking them up into 4 different groups. So that's about 35 students per group. That's a very manageable group to be able to get on the bus, to be able to have in classrooms in that pod and keep them in that idea intact with a cohort, being able to support them in any kind of passing periods that we have so we can maintain social distancing and how we feed and of course how we leave at the end of the day. So if we're working in a very small, controlled, scalable group, it's absolutely possible to make sure that we are sticking with all the requirements we have with both DOH and New Mexico PEV.
So I'm going to just continue on with this real scenario, I guess, that could happen. So if we, let's just give a scenario that we have 7 students waiting for the bus to go to school. Who's taking their temperature before they get in the bus?
Right. So we have talked about that, and we're looking at possibly multiple levels in which they have their temperature taken. So there is possible to have their temperature taken before they enter the bus. It's also possible to have the same kind of checks at the school site because we know that not all students actually ride the bus. Some either walk or dropped off. And then there also can be some opportunities for temperatures to be taken actually in the classroom.
So to me, in my view, I look at this like the first point of contact of these children, more so in the elementary, is the bus. So if a child is carrying the virus and they get in the bus and they don't check the temperature, doesn't that closed environment could possibly expose all the other kids? Now, in taking the temperatures, here again is just a question. You said they're going to do it in multiple areas, right? So if you take the temperature at the bus, I wouldn't think that the bus driver would have to leave his seat to take the temperature. Would you be providing an aid in every bus? Number one. Number two, if a child comes with a 101 temperature, hypothetical situation, and there are no adults at the bus stop, they just left their kids off, what then becomes of that situation?
Those are all real life scenarios, and we've having a lot of conversations about what that means. So what happens if a 7-year-old comes to the bus stop, has his temperature taken, is running a fever? Now what do? We can't get that 7-year-old back to the house because mom and dad may have left for work that day. So we are working through all those scenarios of what that's going to look like so we can make contact with them. Your question about, is it possible we have an aid on the bus? That's possible. That's a possible solution. We're working on those right now with transportation to really have specific answers. The next piece of information that I need to be able to actually answer all those questions is how many students are going to be on that bus, how many bus routes are we going to have, and that tells me what kind of resources we have to move forward to be able to do that. So, a lot of these are hypothetical. I'm not going to have an answer for every single hypothetical. What I have to do next is to really know how many students are going to be wanting to come in a virtual setting, in a hybrid setting, and then link that up with how many teachers, how many bus drivers, how many resources we have to be able to meet the needs of all those scenarios.
Yeah, so then to follow up on that, so what does our district have in place to, so let's say, our bus drivers or somebody's going to be taking their temperature. Do they get off the bus, give the report to the secretary, the principal, so they don't have to retake their temperature? Or I'm just concerned about how we're going to handle all this, just in case somebody's carrying the virus. It's just, and yet we have a vote before us, or we have either to approve or disapprove, or how we're going to go about this, but yet we don't have those answers. And I think our vote or our decision should be based on what we actually have in place for our district, because you're asking for the board to support going back to school, but yet we don't have an answer as to how we're going to check these kids out. I know it's tough, and I know it's hard to find all that information, and I know it's going to be burdensome on staff. I don't expect a bus driver to leave his seat to check somebody's temperature. And still try to manage the rest of the kids. So I think those are important situations, because I firmly believe that there's, like you said, great possibility that kids can be infected by this. So I just don't know. That's kind of a tough one for me. I'm going to continue answering questions because these are questions that we've been asked and that have been asked of us, the board members, and I'm sure because I've seen that everybody's been copied on it. So I'm going to move forward some questions. It's brought to my attention, and you can probably try to confirm this for me. Is it true that our athletes that are going to participate in sports have the choice to attend hybrid teaching, or they have a choice to not attend and still participate in sports? What is the
Yes.
rumor on that one?
The guidance that I have right now is that student athletes do have the opportunity to choose hybrid or choose virtual and still be able to participate if we are, as a district, meeting the definition of hybrid set forth by PED.
Okay, and then you said that on your report that students and family could choose to stay remote if they wanted to. Absolutely. But how does that reflect on our staff if they choose to stay remote? You know, if I know you said there's 30% that said they want to come back. How do you pick and choose of those 30% of our staff members? Now we're talking about teachers of the 30% that want to come back, but yet we still have a lot of staff, our maintenance department, custodial, a warehouse department, the operations end of it, right? Bus drivers, how are we going to approach that if in fact they decide, no, I'm not ready to go back?
I'm not sure if I quite follow your question. I think the next step that we definitely, so in the survey, it was a general survey. So all I know is that 33% of the staff are saying that they're willing to come back. The next step is I need to find out who those 33% of the staff are. Are they teachers? What grade levels are they teaching? And then be able to connect that with the students at the same time, doing the work to be able to find out what students we're looking at. So we're actually connecting bodies with teachers and classrooms. So is that, I don't know, I'm not sure if I understood your question, but that's the next step.
I guess, sorry to interrupt you, but point blank is if our students and families have the choice, I think our staff should have the choice. How is it going to be handled if you need that staff member and they don't want to come back and they want to stay in remote? How are we going to handle picking and choosing? You know, let's say that 30%, you can't fill all the positions in the classrooms. How are you going to handle from that point?
So when you look at it, there's going to be different answers to that depending on the level of school. So when we're talking about an elementary school, it is possible that if we have a teacher that's not willing to come back, but we have a student on that teacher's class list that wants to come back, we may have to have the conversation about moving that child to a different classroom to be able to accommodate the wishes of that family. When we look at secondary, what we're looking at is the idea of, for example, let's say we have a 10th grader and they come in for first period and they have a math teacher and that math teacher's there. So then they're going to be able to go in and actually have in-person instruction with that math teacher there. But second period, they go and it's a science classroom, let's say, and that science teacher is choosing to work from home. They're going to continue in a virtual environment. Then what we'll do is that student will still attend that second grade classroom like they normally would, but they'd be logging on to what we've been doing all year long and logging into Canvas to be able to get that instruction virtually. There would be a different staff member that would be facilitating the students that are there, even though the students are in a virtual setting.
Okay, and then also you stated that you were working with NEA and you're creating a good relationship with them. We had a copy of an email from the NEA that says that there should be a collective bargaining unit to have NEA involved before we move forward. Do you have any information on that? You don't?
No, I have no information about that.
The negotiations, in other words, don't have to take place with NEA prior to us starting school?
I think what you're referring to is a request or a demand by NEA to be able to do that. I got that today about 2 hours ago, and I've talked with our union president about that and let her know that we do have an action item tonight on that. It's very little I can do when I get the request 2 hours before the board meeting.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure that if that's going to be worked out with them. And then you talked about quality control, or you talked about you're going to go and make sure that have a in-house staff to go and make sure that everything is done in the schools prior to PED and fire marshals coming in. Do you think it would be best to have somebody, a crew that's quality control to continue monitoring, not just before they come in, but to continue monitoring to make sure that our staff are still following the recommendations for masking? If there's any needs that are needed at any of our school sites, I don't know. It's just somewhat of like
I think definitely that we are going to have those outside inspectors come in to be able to make sure that we have all the requirements in place. But I also very much trust our teachers. I very much trust our custodians to make sure that we do continue to follow the expectations of what we're going to have to do in this hybrid setting. Is there going to be times where we learn from mistakes that we have? Absolutely. But I very much have a lot of I very much know that our teachers are going to do the right thing to make sure that our kids are going to be able to be in a safe environment.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say that we're going to police our teachers. I meant to say that going to the school sites, making sure that I would guess that if once our elementary school kids go, that I would guess that you're probably going to have some type of sanitation crew to sanitize the playground equipment and stuff like that, just to kind of follow up to make sure. It's more of a policing. It's just to reassure our users, our staff, that we're taking every precaution safe. By no means am I saying that we need to police our teachers. I think it's going to be a tough enough job for our teachers to police the students and themselves, more so than it's going to be an additional burden on our staff to have to try to enforce this, and it's going to be rough, I'm sure. And kids, as we get to the lower levels, some don't want to wear the mask, and they're not cautious about it. But I'm just asking about that too. What is the average size of our classrooms? What is an average size of a classroom?
Depending on the Mr. President, Mr. Otero, depending on the grade level, there's definitely averages, and there's definitely requirements that we can't go over. So, for example, in a kindergarten class, the average is going to be right around 19 or 20. When we get into a high school class, let's say it's a English language arts class, the average is going to be right around 25 to 28. So it just depends on what grade level you're talking about. We're going to have class size averages, but they're going to hover somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's going to be my second question. But that question, what I meant to say is the average square footage class of our classrooms. What is the average square footage class size of our classrooms?
Andy, I hate to put you on the spot, but I don't, you might be able to answer that question more accurately than I can. I do know that our kindergarten classrooms are larger, and that's designed for that type of learning environment. And it also depends on the age of our buildings. But what we have to do is know what that is, because that's going to dictate how many students we can have in there when it comes to social distancing. We will absolutely abide by our social distancing requirements. Andy, do you have an example of a classroom size?
Yes, sir. President Smith, members of the board, Dr. Romero, our average classroom size is 900 square feet.
Okay, so that's good. So based on that average size, coming before us after this is the air filtration systems that we're going to hopefully approve. But the air filtrations on 5 changes say that it'll cover 446 square feet. Do you plan to put 2 machines in each classroom to start off, or how are we going to manage that? Because even at the 3 changes, it says it'll only cover up to 700 square feet. So what is our plan for that air filtration systems that hopefully we'll approve after this?
Mr. Otero, Mr. President, we have 1 filtration system for every classroom right now. And so what the guidance we've been given from NMPED is that those units will be approved for classroom use.
Okay. At this point, I reserve the right to ask more questions in case it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. President.
I believe, Elo Hidon. My bad. You all sound the same with my mask on. Mr. Frank Otero.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Romero, I have some questions regarding the vaccinations, and we all know that we've all been on this ride together, and things have really been looking better here in the county. The numbers are going down. I mentioned to some people today, I know some people that died, and regardless of what people's opinions are out there, there's some people dying from it. So my concern is we were all assured that the vaccinations would occur in adequate time, and I'm just hearing all kinds of anxiety from employees and teachers and what have you. And so first of all, before I continue my talk, how many teachers have a waiver or I'm probably using the wrong word, but will be excused from due to medical issues or personal medical issues? How many? What percentage? I'm not going to ask you numbers, but what percentage would you imagine that would have to stay home for that reason? First of all.
So, Mr. President, Mr. Otero, there is a process for employees to medically have the recommendation to continue to work in a virtual environment due to underlying health conditions. There is a process that they have to be able to report themselves, to be able to go through that process that we will support them in if that should be. And this is definitely part of the plan. There are a lot of examples, many examples where we have employees that have very legitimate reasons to be able to have a need to be able to work in a virtual environment because of underlying health conditions. And we want to be able to support that. I don't know if I have the exact number for you, Mr. Otero. I know that we do have requests, that come in from time to time. I believe that there are some that came in today. Mr. Baca, if I could ask you to just maybe talk, I don't know if you have those numbers in front of you, but kind of, what that overall general number is right now.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero. As of right now, we did have 29 initial inquiries into the remote learning. That was of the fall semester. When the board voted to stay remote, we actually, that ceased. As of right now, from the start of the year till now, we've had 15 requests from our staff members across the category to work remote because of one of the underlying health conditions. So as of today, as of right now, at the time of this meeting, there were 15 requests to work remote.
Thank you, Mr. Baca.
Thank you. Well, I'll continue with my observation anyway. But the bottom line is there's a good number of them out there that kind of want to stay under the radar, and it's usually other people that are speaking on their behalf. But I've been around for a long time, and I'm not going to back off in the vaccination part. I think that we were led to believe that was coming around the corner, and that was just going to fit right into our plan. And so, whether we approve things tonight or not, I really can't approve it. We're so close. We're just so close. And I know that there's kids out there that, are just dying to go to school. And there's some kids that really need to go to school. And, but there's a lot that need to stay home right now. And we've got the prime opportunity to I guess, to squash this. And now with the strains and the variants that are coming out, we had talked, and I had said this months ago, that we hadn't hit our peak, and we hit our peak, about a month and a half ago. And so, we've stayed safe for all this time, but in the meantime, everyone's frustrated being at home, but as they indicated earlier, we're not going back to the old way. We're not going back to the old ways. I can't envision a classroom with 30 kids or 25 kids or what have you. If they're 6 foot apart, you know, we've got staffing issues and we need staff. So you know, right now I've been advocating for it. I like what we have been talking about, but you know, we've just like the kids have, you know, the rug's been pulled out, and it's not anybody's fault in particular. It's just that, you know, it is a pandemic. It is something that only comes around every, you know, every century or what have you. So, you know, and I think there's been a lot more that have come within recent years, polio and what have you. So, you know, and I think you know, I had a talk with Mr. Romero today, and I think I'm venting to, or we're not venting, but we're both sharing the same frustration. And so that's where I'm at right now with this is, we're so close, and you know, for some of the students, it's their time to go out in the world, and for others, they're just starting. And so, you know, I'm concerned for everyone. So thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, you know, I share, you know, many of the same sentiments. I think us not having the opportunity to have those vaccinations for our staff was absolutely very impactful for how we move forward. I do want to say, you know, thank you to Mr. Baca and his team, and the work that our local Valencia Fire has done, our Office of Emergency Management. They've been working hard every day to be able to try to get us back on track with those vaccine schedules. You know, what I can commit to you is that we're not gonna let up. We're gonna keep fighting to try to get back and get our teaching staff back at the front of that 1B schedule, so that it'll help us get there even faster. But thank you for your comments, Mr. Otero. I agree with you. It's something that did definitely change our trajectory. Our goal is to now to try to get back on that pathway.
Mr. President.
Mr. Eloy Hidon.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero. I probably have 7 or 8 pages of notes here, scattered everywhere. But I think right now it's time to feed off of what board member Frank Otero said right there. He's absolutely right. I'm sick and tired of wearing masks. I'm tired of staying home. It's wearing on me. I hate it. I want to go to a restaurant. I want things to be back to normal. Are we going to be there? I don't know. We'll ever be there again. But right now, he mentioned that word vaccine. And I've had this conversation with a few of you on the board. We have the football right now. This is the Super Bowl. We have the football. We're in the 4th quarter. All we have to do is run out the clock. We can't fumble. We do that, we win. I'm understanding that by late spring, early summer, we will have herd immunity. And that's going to be based on enough vaccines being out there and all the other factors that they put into it. So you're right, Mr. Otero. The vaccine is important. I have numbers here. I'm trying to do math. I'm trying to, do fractions here. But when I heard you right away jump on that, Frank, you're absolutely right. I cannot ask a teacher or a staff member to come back to work without that vaccine. Dr. Romero, you're going to have your hands full with people that don't want to take the vaccine, and we're going to have the other scenario, but we'll get there. Mr. Romero, I really want to thank you right now for that proposal that you've given us. That's the best work I've seen in a year. I've asked for something like this, and I really appreciate this. It's titled proposal. I've gone through it. I want to thank, you've been here 2 weeks, and I want to thank you. I want to tell you, I've had calls from secretaries thanking you for putting up PPE for them. They appreciate that. They feel secure about that. Okay, so that's an attaboy. So now I'm going to go the other way. So I hope I don't offend you or get you upset. What you presented us is a proposal. It's beautiful. I have questions all the way through there. And maybe the best thing for me to do is scroll all the way down to the NMPED requirements. What I want to see, and I think this will be easy for us, then I don't have to ask my 9 pages of questions. I don't have to do this math. What I want to see is a plan that we have, a requirement that you're going to have requirements for us. Board member Stephen Otero mentioned, what's going to happen to that student, that 7-year-old, that bus driver is going to go give that temperature. We're going to have whatever, we have a bad temperature there. I could see that liability that we're going to have. That bus driver can't wait for that student. That parent's going to be gone. What's going to happen to that 7-year-old? I want to see a protocol in place. What's going to happen? And that's just one little bitty example. I want to see examples across the board, from masks to what's the protocol from a parent, a group of a family leaving New Mexico and then coming back. What they're going to be required to quarantine. It'll be transparent for us. We will know what we're voting on. I will be able to present this to people that want to ask me questions. Then I can refer back to this. This is a beautiful document you gave us. It's a proposal. I want to see it translated into a requirement on a plan on how we do something like this. I don't know if I'll have support on that, but that's I think that would be easy for me with something to vote on. You mentioned numbers, and I'm going to see if I can, trust me, I have pages of notes here. You mentioned 52.9% of the students want to come back. 41.5% of the parents want the students to come back, and 33.6% of the staff. So what I'm going to ask you, and I don't know if you can provide that, maybe whoever did the survey, whoever the administrator of the survey, maybe have to answer this, and maybe need a couple of minutes, we'll have to come back to it. So we have 8,500 students. Can you tell me how many of those students responded to this survey? We have 8,500 students, so I don't know how that translates into parents. And 33.6% of staff. So I know we have around 1,300. So I would like to see those numbers to see how that translated. So,
Mr. President, Mr. Huron, I may not have those numbers for you at the moment, but I will absolutely get you that breakdown.
Do you understand my question and my path forward with this? So that'll change the percentages there. I mean, when you told me it was 33.6% of the staff, I right away says that was teachers, okay? So,
Mr. Huron, I think I do have the numbers for you. I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry for interrupting. If I can turn it over to Mrs. Chavez, and she can give you the data you were looking for.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero, Mr. Huron, we had a total of 4,959 respondents to our survey. 3,576 were parents or guardians. 738 were Los Angeles school employees. 518 were Los Angeles Schools students. 122 were Los Angeles Schools community members. And we had 5 of the respondents skip that question and not identify which group that they were answering for.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez.
thank you, Mrs. Chavez. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I gotta go do some fractions over here, but okay. I don't know. I want to see something solid, a hard copy of something that we can vote on. I understand it changes daily. I know it'll be a living document, but we got to start somewhere. And I'm ready to reopen these schools, but I want to reopen these schools in a safe manner. And I'm going to echo what board member Frank Otero said of the vaccines. I can't live with myself. Him and I know somebody that just passed, that just had a tragedy, and it was awful. But I cannot. These students are resilient. They're going to be okay with this COVID. That's what it's showing. But they're going to take this COVID back to those parents and grandparents. And I'm not ready to send our teachers back and staff without that vaccine. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Romero.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon.
Mr. President,
Mr. Vickers?
yes, thank you, Mr. President, board members, Dr. Romero. So we've been asking Dr. Romero to give answers to hypotheticals, which can number in the thousands, I'm sure. Many of the school districts in the state last fall were in a hybrid model during a far worse time as far as spread of the virus. And do you have information on what the result was in those districts? The real numbers was, how bad was the spread in school? Was it the same as the community, or what was the result in those districts that were in hybrid models?
Sorry about that, Mr. President, Mr. Vickers. You are correct. There were a number of districts that have already participated in a hybrid model. During that time, they had the ability to be able to do that if their county was in a green zone. And they were able to follow that model up until the end of the semester. And then there was some rule changes when it came to NMPED. I don't want to misspeak about any of the data that came out of those districts. I can anecdotally speak that for many of those districts, they wanted to be able to continue in that model. They felt that they were able to provide a level of protection that was necessary for those students to be able to stay there. And I will say that many of these districts were small districts. They were some of our micro districts. They were able to, one, have the staff available to ensure that they had plenty of square footage and and very little students to be able to do that. Many of the larger school districts, and when we look at the top 10 school districts, which Las Lunas is a part of, you absolutely do see a trend when it came to them being in a virtual environment. And some of that had to be to do with the counties that we're in. They're more populated areas. So, Mr. Vickers, I apologize. I don't have, I don't want to misspeak with any misinformation, but just anecdotally speaking, there was some success with those districts that were in a virtual setting.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Just another question regarding reality. What are the statistics of youth suicides over the last year compared to the year before it, and especially among athletes? And then there's the other issues of substance abuse. And we're looking at one particular area of health and ignoring the rest. And I think we need to look at that.
One more time. Mr. President, Mr. Vickers, that is absolutely a concern that we've all had. We've had many conversations about increases in student suicide, but also just the social emotional health of every student that we have. And we I know students that are having difficult times. I think all of us that are educators can pick out, family members, pick out, students that we've had in the past and families that we know that are having a difficult time right now. And and like Mr. Hidon talked about earlier, I don't want to wear my mask anymore either. I'm ready for restaurants to open up too. I think all this plays a part into that. But back to your comment about, the health and safety of our students when it comes to suicide, to mental health, that's definitely something that's on our mind. I just want to take a moment here, as I was talking to Mr. Wilson Holland about our athletic director, about the opportunity for students to be able to come back in athletics. And he wanted to make sure that, that I was able to express to you all tonight, that our coaches are ready to be able to work with our athletes. They've been kind of itching to do that. We have many athletes that are really wanting to get back into the field of play. This does support them when it comes to their mental health, but also when it comes to them as student athletes and academics. And Mr. Holland's opinion is based on science, and I'm kind of quoting his text to me right now. in 30 years of education and in athletics that social, emotional, and well-being of students is very important, and this directly is tied to student athletes.
I want to touch on some other reality. I know, especially on the east side of the state, many of the athletes have basically participated in school sports in Texas. I know many of the football players have done that. And other sports, I know personally, have been participating in athletics in schools in those districts. And some are going to Arizona also for the same purpose. Seems to me it's a lot more unsafe for them to be going out of state, participating, and then come back to New Mexico. And I just guess I have one last question. In your professional opinion, is the environment that you're proposing for our school sites safer than Walmart or Smith's? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, Mr. Vickers, I want to stay in my realm of expertise. And I can't definitely, definitively say what the safety level is of, one of our, grocery stores or Walmarts or things like that. I know that what I'm presenting to you tonight, I definitely do feel very confident and comfortable in knowing that if we can do this in a very scalable and purposeful fashion, that we will have a level of safety that is going to be able to maintain the health and safety of both our staff and our students if we are able to do that in a scalable way. I think that there are some other pieces to this that are, I think, heavy on all of our minds when it comes to the academic needs of our students, but also the social, emotional support of our students. And so we're kind of weighing all these things together. And I think some of the points brought up tonight about making sure that we have our teachers vaccinated, our staff vaccinated, that's a valid point. I think it's also a valid point that we do have some concerns when it comes to our students having social emotional needs and possibly increases in suicide. So it's a hard decision where we want to be able to make the right one. And what I'm presenting to you tonight is a way for us to be ready. My job is to make sure that our district is ready if we had to do this tomorrow. I don't think that we can do it tomorrow, but I do think we can do it relatively soon, as long as we can do this in a scalable fashion and making sure that we can eliminate as many of those hypotheticals as possible. It's hard to know every single situation, and I'm not going to pretend to think that I have the answer to every single scenario. But what I want to do is be able to definitely have an answer to what we know and what many of us have done, for decades now, is being able to make sure that when our students come to school, that they're safe. And with the presentation I gave tonight, I think we do have a level of safety to be able to do that if we can do that in a scalable and methodical fashion as we bring in more and more students. And whether we do that now or we do that at another time, it's still going to be the same recommendation that we do this in a scalable fashion.
Mr. President?
Mr. Vickers, are you done?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Mr. Hedon.
Sorry that, Mr. Vickers, I seen you hit your mute, so I took it for granted you were done. Mr. President, Mr. Romero, have any of our staff members or anybody in our district received the COVID vaccination?
There are members of our staff that have received the COVID vaccination.
Okay, Mr. Smith, Dr. Romero, are you going to be able to utilize those people that do have the vaccination in strategic spots now? For example, if you have an SRO officer, are you going to be able to have him help somewhere else? If you have, can you say you have somebody in central office, would you be able to use them in the classrooms?
I think if I understand your question correctly, Mr. President, Mr. Hedon, is we want to be able to use our staff, most efficiently and effectively. Now, does that mean that I can use a security guard as a teacher, no, because there is a level of highly qualified in your specialty area. It's the same way I wouldn't have a teacher be a security guard. So, we want to be able to keep people within the realms of their job duties, because that's also part of, how we hired them. But, I definitely think that, I'm gonna say it again, is the next step in which we would be moving forward is to actually be talking with individual staff members about, who are the ones that really want to be able to come back for in-person learning, and then also follow that up with conversations with families and students about who those are, so we can make those connections.
Okay, Mr. Romero, I guess my question is, if we have staff members that have vaccination and they've worked their way up from the classroom, assistant principal into central office, would you be able to use those people back into the classrooms or anywhere else that you would need them?
Yeah.
That's somewhere in your plan.
Yeah. So I think, Mr. President, Mr. Inoni, your question is, can a principal, for example, be able to run a classroom? Well, I'll tell you, I've done that before. I've taken, absolutely, as a superintendent, taken over classrooms when I need to. Now, that's not a long-term solution, because, that principal, that assistant principal, they still have their job duties also. So, it is a good temporary solution. That's a possibility for an emergency situation, but that's not a long-term solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon. So now that all of you guys have taken all of the questions and all of the comments, I'm going to more than likely repeat a lot of your efforts, as I too have quite a bit of notes here. So it's going to be difficult for me to maintain flow, and I want to apologize in advance for that. A lot of the conversations that I've had with people on the phone, community members and staff members, and actually students. I have a couple of nephews who go to the high school and they're student athletes. And I have a grandson that's in middle school at Las Lunas Middle School, and he wants to go back to school to play sports as well. I have a daughter that's worked for the district for a very long time. So I am definitely in tune with some of the items that we're discussing today. But given the conversations we've had via email and via phone calls over the past few days, and I know there's been a lot, board members, and I appreciate you reading those and getting back to those people. I think that's good. It appears to me that the discussion was leaning towards, are we going to go hybrid or are we not going to go hybrid? And me personally, when I look at the picture as broadly as I can, I see it much differently. I see a selection of staff members that want to return to the classroom. And I see definitely a group of students that want to return to the classroom. And I know that the numbers are small as far as the staff goes, 33.6%. And I won't delve too deep into the math to find out which one of those are teachers, how many of them are math teachers, how many are secondary, elementary. I won't even do that. But based on the number that we have right there, I don't see that even if we went to approve the learning plan the way that it is written, we'd have a very small number of hybrid classes, just based on the math. But that being said, if the numbers match and we can get a 9th grade class at Valencia High School for math, and we have students that are willing to do that, we could have a hybrid 9th grade math class at Valencia High School, following proper PPE and protocols and everything. And if there wasn't enough of either, then it would be a remote 9th grade math class at Valencia High School. So to me, some of the questions that I'm asking myself are, can we hold that math class safely and productively? And how do we keep moving forward, continuing to improve on our remote learning efforts and work to incorporate more hybrid classes in the future? So I take a lot of things into consideration, and my thought process is this. There are 4 factors that I think are crucial for me to consider when we start talking about approving this plan. One of them is, what is it that we want to do? And that is, we want to open up our schools. The second one is, what should we do? Well, we should be working to open up our schools. The third one is, what are we allowed to do based on PED, DOH, and everybody else, NMAA. I mean, these are all guidelines that we have to follow. And then the fourth one I think is critical. What are we prepared to do? So when I line all of these up on a graph, obviously the data points don't meet at one thing. If they did, this would be a moot discussion. So in my mind, we have to take steps towards what it is we want to do, and that is to open our schools. And however it turns out today, we're going to start taking steps forward. I believe that we are, and I believe that we already have based on this discussion alone. Some people are going to believe those steps are too small, and some people are going to believe that those steps are too big. And it is perfectly understandable to be uncomfortable about all of this. It's about staying safe, effective, and expanding our comfort zone. So my goal would be tomorrow, if someone asked me, is Las Lunas High School, what'd you guys decide? Are you guys hybrid or are you remote? My deal, ideally, would be to say, well, we're doing both. We are doing everything we can in both arenas as safely and productively as possible. We're working to increase our hybrid footprint, improve our remote learning, working smartly to achieve our ultimate goal of opening our schools. And I think that perhaps after vaccines, we will have a great deal more of staff members that are going to feel comfortable coming back on site. But if we approved the learning plan as it's written right now, as I said, we'd have a small quantity of hybrid classes, and some schools might not even have any. But if we utilize that time to incorporate, evaluate, and fine-tune our hybrid efforts, when we decide to safely go to a full hybrid district, we've learned some things and we're not jumping in with both feet. I think it's very important that whatever we decide, we make sure that to remind ourselves that our ultimate goal is to move forward into that opening of our schools situation and work towards achieving that and taking steps forward. I think it's very important that we begin to take steps forward. I have a couple of questions as well, and some of them are comments, some of them are questions. As far as the New Mexico Activities Association is concerned, two of the talking points that I have is it says at some point and this is reading from a letter from the New Mexico Activities Association. At this point, we are doing 4-to-1 pods until the 22nd, but we're hoping to expand those pods. That question is up at the governor's office with the medical team. But at this point, there are 4-to-1 pods until February 22nd. So that tells me absolutely nothing about what happens after February 22nd. It doesn't say that the governor and her medical team are going to let us participate in any sports whatsoever. So I actually took that into consideration. The second part is, do athletes and coaches have to be vaccinated? That's one of the questions that somebody asked. And according to what the NMAA said, the vaccinations and school reentry is on PED. That's not a decision of the NMAA. So they're not going to get involved in it. One of my questions would be, well, what did PED say? Do our coaches have to be vaccinated? Do our athletes have to be vaccinated? I don't know the answers to those questions. So those would be a couple of questions that I would be looking for answers for. The other one is based on some of the personal conversations that I've had with community members and staff members. And I'm going to talk about how I feel about this. Our staff, who I routinely praise deservingly as much as I can, has been here for us when we've needed them for years. Some of you for a lot of years. And I want to ensure that we're there for them when they need us, and they do need us. So some of the questions I have, Dr. Romero, is how are we going to address, because we're giving them 2 weeks and sometimes less to report to work. So we have staff with children that are now given this short period of time to report to work. Is there a way that we can make concessions to work around that if they legitimately have a issue that they need to be taken care of? Because on page 5, it states that school staff will fully transition to buildings with Wednesday, February 17th as a workday. So that's one of the questions I have, and I can just do them one at a time, Dr. Romero, or I can just keep going. The second part is to scale the in-person personnel based on the occupancy of each site. As I stated, we're going to have very few hybrid classes based on the math if you do it right here. So do we need a full site full of staff members if it's possible for them to continue productively working from where they're working from right now? And I think it's entirely possible that there'll be no hybrid at any school sites based on the numbers. And another question I have is, some staff are not fully comfortable returning until the vaccine. And how are we going to address those issues based on the February 17th deadline? Because, and I don't want to call it a deadline, that was a horrible word, workday, based on the fact that I think it's a legitimate concern to want to be vaccinated in order to return to work. I think if we return to some sort of a hybrid model, even with a few classes, at least that would be, we'd be able to evaluate our efforts and move forward from that. But all of these concerns, the personal concerns for the staff, is some of the stuff that I needed to get answered probably before I'm, willing to make a decision on how we do this. I'm sure that there's going to be concessions for these individual staff members. So if you could just address those, and then I could continue probably.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So part of the process is to be able to allow enough time for transition. And one of those is to be able to allow time for families to be able to find what those childcare options are going to be. This is why another reason it's not going to be possible, in my opinion, to be able to move forward, quickly when we say, a February 8th date in which the governor allowed us to be able to have the option of a virtual environment. When we look at, for example, elementary schools, we're really looking at about a month and a half out to be able to help families, give them enough time to be able to find those child support needs. And that is going to be an issue. This could be an issue for our own staff. It's going to be an issue for our community. And until we're able to really get back really into a normal setting, that's going to continue to be an issue when it comes to child support. Now, the worry, the thing that we have to consider, though, is that I also talked about holding the integrity of cohorts in place. And so when we have any child, they have to be able to stick to that cohort, and we have to not allow any children to be able to mix cohorts. And that even includes family members or our staff members' children. So that's going to be a concern. That's going to be an issue. That's not an easily solvable issue. But what we want to do is be able to give our teachers, our staff members, enough time to be able to find a solution to that child support issue. Your second question had to deal with occupancy, and that's absolutely a possibility. What I talked about tonight is really looking at a 25% model or a 33% model, and that does require a certain level of staff to be able to do that effectively. Now, we can absolutely scale that back to maybe it's a 10% model. And that's just for sake of this argument, a number there. So we can look at those 33% of the teachers that don't want to be on campus. We can definitely look at the most needy kids when it comes to our at-risk students, when it comes to equity issues. We can definitely look at those students that would absolutely benefit from that in-person learning and be able to maybe match them up with those teachers. That's absolutely something that is possible. I might have missed your last question, Mr. President.
Oh, speaking through your microphone, which is kind of easy. I was actually, the third part was about the staff being fully comfortable about being vaccinated.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I think that's something I agree with. I think that's absolutely a valid point and a valid concern. Again, we had a very solid plan, and I was really excited to work with Valencia Fire, Office of Emergency Management, our local DOH. We had a plan in place, and it got taken from us. And I think you're going to hear that same story across our state. So what I can do now is continue to fight to get our staff back in front of that, on the front end of that 1B schedule. And but to do that, we're going to have to continue to work with New Mexico PED and the governor's office to make that happen. But I agree with you; it's a valid concern, and that is something that definitely at this board has to take in consideration about when our start date is going to be.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. And I know we had this conversation about opening schools is not just getting the students back and continuing the educational process. This is a legitimate step in kickstarting our economy, in my opinion, if you just filter everything down to the bottom line of people getting back to work. So one of the other concerns was that I had, and this was part of the presentation, was on page 3. Sorry, I numbered my pages. It says students remain fully online for the remainder of the semester. So my question is, what if they're not comfortable at the end of the semester?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So there are some assumptions with this, and the assumptions are, and I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, is that, when will we be able to, at a state and national level, be able to have a level of vaccines out across our population? There are some conversations about, what is the year going to look like in August? And there is absolutely some conversations could we still be in this mode of either a virtual or hybrid environment? That's a possibility. I think for the sake of this presentation tonight, it was to be able to give families the opportunity to be able to, one, choose to stay in a virtual environment for the remainder of the school year, or to allow them the opportunity to be able to move into a hybrid environment. Is it possible that this could be extended into the summer and even into next year? That is a possibility, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Monroe. And I ask these questions because my main concern, and I'm sure it's a concern of all of ours, is if and when, actually, let me change that, when we do return to the classroom, and we will, I don't know when that's going to be, but we will return to the classroom. One of my main concerns is I don't want to come back to where we are right now. I want to make sure that we continue to move forward. And in order to do that, we have to be fully prepared to handle all of the concerns that the board members were talking about earlier in their presentations and questions and comments. So I appreciate all of you doing that. I want to commend you on this plan. I think it's well thought out. It flows really, really well. A lot of my questions were answered in the plan just by the way it was presented. So you knocked out half of my questions with that. That's the last comment I believe I have. Board members, do you have any more comments?
Mr. President, I have one question. I know, Mr. Romero, you received notification just a couple hours ago from NEA. And that's something that you guys are going to probably have to sit down and work out between both groups. Are you going to have a resolution before we have a reentry with them, or is that going to be work? Is it going to be a work in progress, or are we going to be waiting for them? Are we going to be waiting for? Are we going to be waiting for a collective bargaining agreement as a school board?
Mr. President, Mr. Hill, and members of the board, yes, I did get a letter from our local NEA. What I was told today that this was really something coming from state NEA, so I think we're going to see this conversation happening across the state. I have not had enough time to be able to process exactly what they are asking and when it comes to bargaining. So that's something I can't fully answer right now. I want to be able to give you a full answer. I do want to, I absolutely am very interested and want to know how we move forward with local NEA being part of that conversation with me. And so what I need to do now is actually work with our local NEA and kind of read that, that demand for bargaining to see exactly what they're asking for. But I don't have a complete answer to your question at this moment, Mr. Ito.
Thank you, Mr. Ito. So if there are no further comments, I would stand for a motion on item number 5.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Stephen Otero.
I make a motion that we remain on remote learning and revisit this after spring break, making sure that our staff have received the vaccine prior to us coming back to hybrid learning.
I'm sorry. I'm not understanding. So you wanted to make a motion that we don't even discuss this until after the staff has been vaccinated.
My motion is that we stay in remote learning and revisit this after spring break in the hopes that our staff have all been vaccinated, those that are looking for it.
Just 1 second, I'm getting a date. So spring break, first day back is March 21st, and we have a board meeting on March 23rd.
I think that might be too short to tell where we're going to be with the vaccine unless we can be notified electronically if all staff members have received it. So I just agree with Mr. Frank Otero, Mr. Eloy Giron, that we should be, not only teachers, every staff member should be vaccinated prior to going to a hybrid learning environment. I don't know how much more I'm going to word this. I can, if you can give me suggestions how to reword it. If I need to revisit my motion to have a special meeting in April, I'll ask that of Dr. Romero, because I know 2 days after coming back, we won't know if those teachers have been, or the staff members have been afforded the opportunity to receive the vaccine. So do we move it to April?
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, what I can definitely do is make sure I keep you updated on what our vaccine schedules are going to look like over the next few days, next few weeks, or the next month or so. And that might help, allow us to know more specifically when we are going to have a date where we have the, either all or the vast majority of our staff vaccinated. Today, at this moment, I couldn't tell you how long that's going to take. We are not at the point where we know when our staff are going to be able to really be on the front of that vaccine schedule. Hopefully, I'll be able to know that soon, but I can't tell you that right now.
So, Mr. Stephen, so we have a board meeting on the 23rd, and just a suggestion, maybe tabling this item until the meeting on the 23rd would be something that we can consider. I don't want to put it off past that because maybe it's something that could change as this is a changing thing. But by all means, it's your motion.
Mr. Smith, I'm having a hard time hearing you. There's a lot of echoing. I apologize for that, but.
Mr. Smith, I think Dr. Romero, yes, needs just to go ahead and you got it.
It was my fault. I apologize.
So what I was suggesting, Mr. Stephen Otero, was perhaps we table this item until March 23rd, so we don't put it off any past that, and then we reevaluate where we're at as a district, and then we can discuss it at that point.
Yeah, okay, we can say table. I just said revisit this. I think it's half a dozen or 6 eggs. So however you prefer, Mr. President.
Oh, what I would prefer. Okay, let's see. Could you go ahead and make your motion, Mr. Stephen Otero?
I make a motion that we remain in remote learning and revisit this after spring break at our board meeting on the 23rd, in the hopes that our staff have all had the opportunity to be vaccinated.
So I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to revisit this item on March 23rd as a discussion and action item depending on the status of the vaccinations for our staff. How's that?
Perfect. That sounds good.
I doubt it's perfect. I'll stand for a second.
Mr. President, just a point of this motion is we currently do have some CEL classrooms that have already started. I'd like permission to be able to continue with those CEL classrooms for those specific needs of those students.
Mr. President?
Mr. Hidon, I'm really bad at unmuting here.
At this point, I would like to second Mr. Otero's motion. And Dr. Romero, I think we could go ahead and vote on this, but we can make sure we give you direction to continue what is being successful right now. Okay, I think maybe that'll be easier that way.
So I would prefer if continuing with the CEL classes was actually part of the motion. If that's in fact the motion you want to make.
Sure. I'll allow you to state that motion. Yes, continue with what we've got going on right now.
So I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to remain in remote learning and revisit with a discussion action item on March 23rd while continuing the CEL classes.
Depending on, the vaccine has to be in that, I think.
Well, we can see if the vaccines are done on the 23rd. We won't, obviously we're not going to do anything before then.
You're the boss.
Nobody tells me that. So let me try this one more time. I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to remain in remote learning until the board meeting on March 23rd, with the exception of the CEL classes, which are currently in progress.
Mr. President, I will second that.
I have a second by Mr. Eloy Hidon. Mr. David Vickers, how do you vote?
Can we be allowed further discussion before we vote?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, to me, I just see the proposal that Dr. Romero made as pretty simple. We have an obligation to the students and the families, their parents of this district. That is our obligation, to provide for their needs. We are simply giving them another option. We're not telling them they have to go back to school. We're giving them the option. If you'd like to go back in person, we're going to make it available to you. And the ones who don't want to go back don't have to. We're just adding an option to provide for the wants and needs of students and their parents. And so I don't support the delay because we're suddenly getting off on other things. We're not thinking about the students and their parents, which is those that we are obligated to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. If there's no further comment, Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
On behalf of the students and the parents, I vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon, and I vote yes. Motion carries 4-1. That brings us to item number 6, approval of purchase Gorman Industries for HEPA units, all school sites 24,300 Federal. Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before you have a request to purchase our Gorman Industries for HEPA units. This is for all school sites. This is going to be a requirement set forth by our earlier conversation to be able to meet the air filtration requirements. Again, I do have one set up here in the boardroom, and I apologize for some of you that are at home that can't see that. We'll keep it set up. So if you board members, if you'd like to come by and check it out, it is there. What we did is we looked for a unit that would be work well within an educational classroom setting that wouldn't be overly burdensome when it came to size or noise, but did meet the requirements that PED has set forth with us. So we'll have two levels of air filtration going on at the same time. One is that we do have a level of filtration in our current HVAC systems that are MERV 9s as average in the classrooms. And this would be a second level of air filtration for those classrooms. Let's see. So with that, I really do stand for any questions, but I'll see here. Where's she at on here? Mrs. Sermons, can you just give us a quick update as to how many units we're looking at, what the price is per unit?
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Mr. President, members of the board, we are asking authorization to purchase 590 portable HEPA filtration systems. We have already ordered 20 that are already been placed in the classrooms. The CEL classrooms, the students started attending yesterday. The additional 590, we're expecting the majority of those to come in early next week and start placing those in classrooms. And then we will, as the rest are available, we will be placing them in the classrooms. So this purchase is for $356,000. We did receive funding from the state of $239,000, and the remainder of the units will be purchased out of CARES funding.
So thank you, Mrs. Sermons. And look at that. I mean, that's what our tech guys are amazing. Look at that. You start talking about it and they put a picture right up for us. That is a picture of what the unit looks like. Again, these are going to be units that will be for every classroom. And this is going to be a requirement that we have from both PED and our fire marshal to be able to meet the air quality standards in our classrooms. Now, every other school district in the country are ordering these right now. So I want to thank Ms. Sermons and her team for really finding these and being able to procure them so we have them ready to come in pending the outcome of this action item. But we did find a vendor that meets those requirements and does have them in stock. We want to be able to take advantage of that. So thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the board. I stand for any questions.
Board member questions?
Mr. President, this is Frank Otero.
Mr. Frank Otero.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the purchase for item number 6, the approval of purchase Gorman Industries for HEPA units, all school sites, 24,300 federal.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. I have a motion by Mr. Frank Otero to approve item number 6, approval of purchase Gorman Industries for HEPA units, all school sites, 24,300 federal. I'll stand for a second.
I'll second that motion.
I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Just one comment before I vote yes. I would suggest that hopefully, I noticed that we have 500 plus units and 2 packs of the filters that maybe we could try to secure more filters because it looks like we're getting half, but I do vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5. That will bring us. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the board.
Sorry, that was an echo and I went with it. That brings us to item number 7, announcement of meetings. As allowed by the Open Meeting Act and District Open Meetings Resolution, on occasion, a quorum of board members attend the same function, including those held at school sites at the district level, as well as sports functions, conferences, workshops, and trainings. Board members will refrain from discussing and/or acting on board issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. I would like to announce the following meetings. On February 10th through the 13th, there is the New Mexico School Board Association Virtual Board Institute. A quorum will be in attendance. That will be held via Zoom. On February 16th, there is a Finance Committee meeting at 4 p.m. At February 23rd, 2021 in the boardroom. There is a regular board meeting at 6 p.m. Again, all the meetings and locations are dependent on mandates from the governor, and if need be, they will be held via Zoom. That will bring us to item number 8, adjournment. I'll stand for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn this meeting.
A motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to adjourn. I'll stand for a second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Hidon. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And before I vote, I would like to thank John and Brian, our technical staff throughout the district, our superintendent, Ms. Wolf, and everybody else that made this meeting possible. Thank you for your hard work. Keep up the good work. I vote yes too. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.